everybody. Great, wonderful show. I always have a great time every year here. And this is exciting because I hope you guys understand how many movies, how many classic movies this guy shot. Everyone gets it, right? Legendary guy. I've been fortunate enough to interview him a few times, but normally it's for a specific movie. So I love that today we'll get to talk about his whole career, and if you guys have questions, we'll throw those in too. So please welcome Mr. Dean Cundey. How are you, Dean?
Very good, thank you very much.
It just seems more comfortable to hold it, doesn't it? This
Yeah,
is
it does. Can you see me?
So, let's go way back to the beginning. Not that far back, but the beginning.
Not that far.
Basically, I mean, this is what I'm always fascinated with filmmakers in general, people that are directors, writers, actors, is where that seed begins, where their love of movies begins. And for you, I don't know if cinematography was the first thing that stood out to you, but just in general, going back to when you were a kid, what were some of the movies that wowed you and made you fall in love with movies?
Well, when I was, 12 years old or so, my mother used to drop myself and a couple of friends at the Saturday Kids Matinee. That's back when you could do that and you were not an irresponsible parent. Why was it safer then, do you know?
Is it safer?
Well, I don't know. But anyway. And I fell in love with films because the Saturday matinee was usually some kind of an adventure film, a lot of times Disney. There was 10 cartoons and all that stuff. But I fell in love with the idea that, not the characters or the story, right? But with the idea that there were people out there somewhere making these films, taking us on these journeys that you can't go in real life. And the one that was probably one of the most vivid was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the Disney film, 1955. And I became so enamored with movies that I just, would make little sets and I would build things. And in high school, I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I decided I was going to go to film school. So when I announced to my parents that I wanted to go into movies, my mother said, it's almost impossible to get into movies, and it's even more impossible to succeed. Wouldn't you rather be an anesthesiologist? I have no idea how that connected.
Much easier.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. And I said, no. So I went to UCLA Film School, and I got enamored with the visual storytelling. I took a class from the very legendary cinematographer James Wong Howe, who had won the Academy Award for black and white movies and HUD and things like that. And after film school, I just took any job I could get in low-budget films. And I think I was fortunate in that it was a period of time when that was possible. Before me, trying to get into film was impossible. It was a closed system, the studio was an old boys club. And just about that time, there was this market for real low-budget films for drive-in theaters. And back in the days when they still had drive-in theaters a lot. No video yet. So there was this market for these kind of niche films. And so I started working on any movie I could get,
Including Without Warning. Does anyone see that?
Without a Warning. But even before that, for Roger Corman, who...
I didn't know you got your start with Corman? Doing Corman films?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
So anyway, I just gradually sort of worked my way up into ladders, and then I did like maybe 15 low-budget action movies, B movies, as they were. Now the B movies are made by the studios, but in those days, you know, there was a market for them. And so I worked on those, and then I got a phone call from the script supervisor that I'd worked with, Deborah Hill, and we'd done 4 or 5 movies together. And she said, you know, I'm working on this movie. I'm writing it with this other young filmmaker guy. I think you'd make a good team. Why don't you come and meet John Carpenter? And I said, okay, who's that? So I did, and John and I hit it off, and we made this movie, Halloween. And
It's a pretty good one.
And I was very pleased with the fact that I'd been doing these low-budget films that I sort of categorized as girls in bikinis with machine guns, and then something blows up. And the directors in general were used to, they wanted to use the camera to record actors talking and then these things blowing up. And John was the first guy who really wanted to use the camera to tell the story, to intrigue the audience and suck them in. And that's what I wanted to do. I was so excited, and he and I made a team, and we were off and running.
Now, at that point when you first met John to do Halloween, did you go back and watch his previous films? Because I think something even like Assault on Precinct 13, which I just revisited, and it's such a great movie. Visually, it's like one of those filmmakers that feels like his style and voice was there from the beginning. So did you recognize that in his first couple films?
I think so. I think that's one of the things that intrigued me first with interviewing with him. And also, we watched Assault, and the fact that he really had a visual style, and that's of course what I really wanted to do. So it was pretty evident from the beginning, and of course he chose interesting films for us to look at and talk about. You know, I mentioned earlier today that The Thing was one of them, and he loved Howard Hawks. We looked at Hawks westerns and things like that.
I think he was quoted as saying that of all the films, the most fun he ever had making a movie was Halloween. And because basically you guys are a bunch of kids, nobody's really paying attention to what you're doing, it's an independent film, and then it became this ginormous piece of horror cinema. So what do you remember about that? Is that the same for you? Did you guys have a lot of fun doing this particular movie?
Yeah, and I think we got spoiled because the criteria was set down by Mustafa Akkad, who was the producer and the financing guy. And he said, John, I want you guys to make a movie, babysitters being killed on Halloween. And John and Deborah said, oh great, you know what we could do with the characters of the girls? And what will they, John? Babysitters being killed on the Halloween. See you around. Bye. So we were able to sort of make it up ourselves, and that sort of spoiled us because there was no studio looking over our shoulders. There was nobody saying, I think the girl number 3 should, and whatever. So we got spoiled with that and the fog and so forth. So that when John finally got into and myself into studio films, and the studio has this obligation in their mind to oversee the films. No, your story should. Don't forget, you've got to. Why did you need more close-ups? You need whatever, and so John got a little disenchanted with the studio system, and I did too, but I was a little more separated from it. He was dealing directly with the imposition of story and character and all that stuff, and I just got to make the movie.
All right, before we get into the studio stuff, regarding Halloween, I know Tommy Lee Wallace was the gentleman who technically designed the Michael Myers mask. And my memory of it is that he brought two ideas to the table. One was like a clown or something like that, and then the other was just the white Shatner mask that ended up becoming the legendary Michael Myers mask. So what do you remember about seeing that mask for the first time? Because I think this is a time period before the copycats, the slashers, the masked killer, and what stands out to this day about Halloween is basically a lot of the ways that you present that mask, the way it's lit, coming in from the dark. There's like so many impressive things about it. I think Tommy said when everybody saw the white mask, they were like, ooh, that's creepy. So did you get that sense when you first saw the mask? You're like, oh, this is gonna be fun to shoot.
Yeah, it was, from the beginning, we really talked about Michael Myers was a force, an evil, as he obviously become known. And they didn't want a personality, so he steals the garage mechanics overalls, coveralls, and the mask came from somewhere, and it was this character, and we really had fun with the idea that he was just this, omnipresent, always there force of evil, and we didn't have to worry about characters and dialogue and blah, 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 and stuff like that, and it was all visual storytelling.
And how soon after you guys did Halloween in the Fog did you jump into the studio system? Because I know you were doing a lot of stuff for Universal. You had shot Psycho 2, then obviously went on to do The Thing. So did Halloween lead to the studios looking at you as this? No, is that how you broke into the studio system?
No, I think breaking into the studio, the Thing was the first real studio film. So we were at Universal using their stages and facilities and all of that. And that was sort of where Universal noticed me and started to recommend me for other movies. They liked the fact that I blended into their mechanism and their crews, and I was characterized as needing fewer expendables, tape and gels and all that, than all the other guys. Let's use him. He's efficient and cheap. And so it was one of those things that I think helped me get into Universal as a sort of a recommended guy.
Let's dispel a rumor or clear a rumor. I've always wanted to ask you about this. You shot Halloween 2 and 3, and I think two of my favorite things about those movies is the way they look. They're beautifully shot. But I had heard that you didn't really want to do Halloween 2. At the time, I think this guy named Steven Spielberg reached out to you and asked you to do Poltergeist. So apparently, to try to not do Halloween 2, you asked for a lot of money, thinking that they would not, well, we're not going to pay him all that, and they did. So you got paid a ton of money on Halloween 2, trying to outbid yourself out of that job. Was there any truth to how that worked out?
Where did you hear that?
Audio commentary, sir.
Oh, yes, actually, it was true. It was an interesting story at the time. I was at home, I don't know, thinking about getting another job, and I got a phone call. And it was this woman who says, "Hi, this is Kathy Kennedy. I'm the assistant to Steven Spielberg, and he's interested in talking to you about a movie. Are you interested?"
Yes.
I said, okay. So I called my agent. And I said, first of all, I hung up the phone. My first thought was, now who is this? Steven Spielberg calling me? No, this is one. Was this the script supervisor? No, it must have been somebody who was just trying to, wind me up. And so I didn't think anything of it. And then I got a phone call a little later, and she said, "Hi, this is Kathy Kennedy. Steven would like you to come in tomorrow at 3 or whatever." I thought, oh, well, that's pretty specific. So I called my agent, and I said, hey, David, I just got this phone call from Steven Spielberg's office about me going in and talking to Steven about the movie. And David said, oh, that's nice. And I'm thinking, well, he probably should really be saying, wow, that's really great. Yeah. He said, oh, that's nice. So I went the next day, and I met with Spielberg, and he was doing Poltergeist. He was producing, Toby Hooper was directing. So I said, hey, yes, and he said, yeah, I would love you to do this movie because I saw something or other. I can't remember, it was Escape from New York or whatever before it. And so I'd like you to do this movie. And I said, well, that sounds excellent. And he said, yeah, it's like this ghostly thing and blah, blah, blah. I said, great. So I went home and I called up my agent and I said, David, I just met with Steven Spielberg, and he wants me to do this movie, he says. And David says, well, that's nice. And I said, oh, what is there something? He said, well, he's producing it, he's not directing it. And I said, oh, well, still produced by Steven Spielberg, never heard, right? He said, oh, okay. Well, I'll check it out. So he calls back a little while, an hour later or something. And he says, guess what? Steven Spielberg wants you to do this movie. I said, yeah, that's what I did. He said, well, that's, he's only producing it. He's not directing it. I said, yeah, but still produced by it. He said, okay, there's one little issue. I said, what's that? He said, well, you're committed to Halloween 2. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, that's the sequel, and John and Deborah want you to do it. And I said, well, let me see. Sequel to movie, Steven Spielberg movie. Sequel to movie. He said, no, you don't understand. You're part of the deal. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, their deal is that they make the movie if you shoot it, because John's not directing. I said, okay. John's not directing Steven Spielberg movie. I said, well, that doesn't seem, like a big deal. And he said, yeah, but they don't get the movie unless you do it. I said, well, I never heard of this. Why is this? Why? Well, they thought it would be automatic. And I said, okay, no. So I said, okay, let's test them. So I named some outrageous figure at the time. Now it's like, nothing. And he said, well, that's a lot of money. And I said, well, yeah, let's see how serious they are. So he said, well, I'll check. And I got a phone call 10 minutes later from Deborah. Why, we hear that you're asking for whatever the money was, and that's outrageous. And I said, well, yeah, but it's a Spielberg-produced movie, and John's not directing. She couldn't see this part. And I said, so, how serious are you that I have to be part of it? She said, this is, I can't, I'll talk to John. Called back 10 minutes later, and she said, okay, if you're going to be like that. So, sadly, I had to turn down Poltergeist in order to do Halloween 2, which wasn't directed by John, but it established my price. So
did you get paid the most for Halloween 2 out of everyone that worked on that movie?
Yeah, I think probably.
That's worth an applause. Come on.
So anyway, that was a story about that. And I understand Steven can hold a grudge. So he didn't call me back for the next movies or two. It wasn't until quite a while later.
That little Jurassic Park movie.
Well, Hook first.
Hook.
I did Hook. And, as we were nearing the end of Hook, Steven said, so anyway, I'm doing this other movie. Hook went over schedule and over budget because it was his movie that he had to make it, as a matter of fact, he told me, his Peter Pan movie. And so towards the end of it, he said, so anyway, Jurassic Park is this movie that Universal wants me to make. It's just a little action movie. Are you interested? And I said, yeah, anything with you, Steven. So okay with me. And so we made that little action movie.
It made a little money.
Yeah.
First movie to make $1 billion in the history of movies.
Wow.
And here, let me clear this away. This is the bonus I got for it. But it was good credit.
I see. Forgive me, guys, for delving a little bit away from horror, but I think Back to the Future could be like one of 5 perfect movies. Like every time I know everything about it. It's Back to the Future. Come on. And we'll have a couple of questions regarding this, but the first being, for us, movies like Back to the Future, Halloween, Jurassic Park, they're so iconic to us. We've seen them a million times. I know every frame. Can you enjoy the movies objectively, being that you were there every day on set, looking through the viewfinder, having no idea that they would be the successes they are? I mean, can you watch Back to the Future now, all these years later, objectively, and enjoy it in a way that we do?
I think I enjoy them a little differently, movies. Other people's movies I watch, and I sort of realize I'm watching with 2 halves of my brain. One is I'm watching the story and all that stuff, and the other side I'm saying, wow, that was an interesting way to do that. I'll have to steal that idea. So, I think I watch movies differently, and I've actually done lectures and classes and stuff for people, and I will run a movie and talk through it. And these are not film classes and stuff, but regular folks. I just did one recently in France, and it was the city was invited with a whole bunch of people. And I did this whole thing, and at the end, people came up and said, I don't know if I'll ever be able to watch a movie again the same way, now that you've stripped away all of the, So I think it's kind of the same for me. I watch and I think back and say, oh, yeah, I remember when we did that. Wasn't that clever? Or why in the world did that was so stupid. Why did I do that? So, I think it's sort of like reliving, things I did and things we did as a company, and enjoying, the problem solving and remembering that that wasn't supposed to happen. Look how we fixed it. That kind of stuff.
And also regarding Back to the Future, I'm curious if this has ever happened in your career, either before or since. But everyone knows that you guys shot for something like 5-6 weeks with Eric Stoltz as the lead of the film, and then very abruptly had to fire him as Marty McFly, and then Michael J. Fox came on board. Rest is history. Like, you wouldn't tell the difference. You see the movie, you're like, oh my God, he's amazing for it. When you're in the middle of a production like that has that drastic a change in the middle, were you nervous at all that, I don't know how this movie's going to turn out now, or was it obvious when Michael J. Fox took over the role that's like, oh, now it's working?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story how we got to that, but it was a period of 6 weeks, and about the second week, Bob said, this isn't working. I want this to be working. And said, Stephen, we've got to do something. And Stephen said, well, give him another week. Maybe he'll work with us. Well, it didn't, it didn't happen. So they were behind the scenes arranging for Michael and stuff. We would shoot a scene, and then we'd shoot Chris Lloyd's, Doc Brown's close-up. And I would say, okay, now we're going to do the reverse on Eric, and Bob would say, no, I don't think we're going to need that. At which point I started to say, oh, I see. So 6 weeks, we're out at the mall shooting all the stuff with the doc shows in the car for the first time. And Michael showed up that night, and there was this immediate sort of reaction from the crew. Ah, yes, this is Marty McFly.
Yeah.
And it was, it was pretty obvious from that point on that, it was going to be a lot more fun as a movie, but also for us.
I do want to open up in a minute, but before we go to the audience questions, let's talk very briefly about Jurassic Park, because for most of us, you were talking about some of the films you grew up with, going to see the adventure films, and I think everyone has a weird fascination with dinosaurs. I know I did as a kid, so it's like, oh my God, there's a movie with giant dinosaurs. And what surprises me about Jurassic Park to this day, I love the 3D restoration. They did the 3D conversion. It's almost as if you guys shot it in 3D, even though you didn't. It wasn't planned that way, but the way the shots are orchestrated. So I mean, was that for you kind of a dream come true to do a film of that sort with adventure and sci-fi elements and everything? And also just from a technical standpoint, I think the reason I love the first one more than any of the others is because it's the perfect marriage of Stan Winston's work and minimal CGI, whereas, no disrespect to Jurassic World, it's fine, but I don't see a practical dinosaur head in that movie at all. Whereas when I see the original, it looks, it's flawless, the way that you guys pulled off that illusion. So for you as a cinematographer, was it kind of fun to be combining all these elements that you've learned on previous films for that one?
Yeah, I think there's films that are sort of these perfect combinations, perfect moments, perfect storms of people and technology and story and characters and all that stuff. Back to the Future was one of those. Jurassic was definitely one of those because I had done Roger Rabbit before that. We had learned how to combine, imaginary, animated characters into the real world, make you believe that they were interacting with objects and space and all of that. For me, Jurassic was those kinds of sensibilities brought, to work. Stephen, with his visual storytelling and so forth, the boys at ILM creating this technology, this illusion that nobody had done before in a computer ever. And the fact that Stan was on top of his game with creating these. I was telling somebody the other day about the fact that we had a giant full-size T-Rex from the waist up with the head, all the stuff, the attack of the car, involved interacting with this full-size T-Rex. That was this amazing combination of hydraulics and mechanics and rubber skin and a lot of hydraulics before then were sort of like backhoe stuff, and they invented this computer feedback loop that would sense and decelerate the stuff, and it was all operated by this little tiny, what they call a Waldo, which was a miniature of it, and it would smooth the action, and it was amazing. I had to actually do it.
Man the T-Rex.
But anyway, all of those things were all about people concentrating on something new that so intrigued them, and so they so wanted to do better than anyone else had done, and I got to be part of that process, to be able to concentrate fully. It wasn't sort of like, so and then the dinosaur will come and it'll destroy all the buildings and then pick up this car and throw it. And, which is what they did now. Then it was sort of like, how would a dinosaur? And you actually thought about it. So that raptor in the kitchen scene is one of my favorites because there were so many problems that had to be solved. The lighting, because of the reflective surfaces of the kitchen itself, let alone dinosaurs and the animatronic ones. And I said, you know, what we learned on Roger Rabbit was any time the characters could interact with the world, it created this believability. So I said, put a whole bunch of pots and pans up on this table. And they said, well, they'd all be stored. And I said, no, put them up there and we'll have the dinosaurs knock them off, you know. Well, I look at that scene and say, oh my God, that was one of my contributions. And, you know, it really sold the whole idea because you see this real world interacted on by these imaginary computer generated creatures. So it was really this labor of love for so many people.
And it worked beautifully.
Yeah, and we came in under schedule.
Oh.
You know, normally, you know, those things run over and stuff. Stephen was, you know, absolutely committed to coming in on schedule or under. We all did that by, you know, being so involved.
Excellent. If you have the means to see the 3D version of the original Jurassic Park, it's terrific. Okay, let's open it up to some people in the audience. Does anyone have any questions for Dean? Let's start right over here. Questions? Right back there.
When Back to the Future hit the big screen, I was the Fox photo reporter on this, and I looked but I'm curious, who approached you and how did you get your product into a film? And you did use a real chaos, but
Yeah, it's interesting. There was this kind of transition where, you know, people would say, hey, if we put real product in here, I bet they'll pay us or they'll give us a whole bunch of whatever. So starting probably in the, I don't know, 70s or 80s, now there are product placement divisions at Universal whose job it is to go through the script and say, computer, Apple, you know, and they, you know, but I know that on Back to the Future, we had a deal where Pepsi put in money, and you know, because Michael J. Fox had a big deal with Pepsi. And it was interesting because one day we're out on the back lot, and the cooler had in it 7-Up and Coke and all the stuff that everybody drinks. And one of the producers came over and said, hey, everybody, so the guys from Pepsi Corporate are coming today. Michael's got this big deal, and Michael, we always drove, who was never seen without a Pepsi. He said, so everybody, please be aware of that we can't have any Cokes on the set. Everybody has to drink Pepsi. And about half the crew said, we hate Pepsi. It's too sweet, it's too whatever. Do these people from Pepsi not know there is such a thing as Coca-Cola that people drink? So we're not going to, so everybody sort of kept it away, but nobody really, you know, went and drank Pepsi when they didn't want it. So, but it is a big business.
Questions? Right here?
So your role with the film is massive, it's huge. You're creating the visual language, the visual tone and lighting, and helping create a world for a film that we grow so attached to. I all of your films, my childhood. I went to South Pasadena last year and babysitters' houses, and I was just looking at how not very far apart they are. They're very close together, but in the scene when Michael's chasing Lori across the street, it looks so far, and it's such a slow thing, and so much tension building. What goes into shooting something like that where you're choosing like a lens or the lighting, or is it in the script? Is it a collaboration like with John, or something you decide, say, hey, like this needs to look further, like we need to make this build something slowly. Like what goes into that process? I'm just curious, how does that form?
For those who didn't hear the question, many years ago, I was a small child. No, I won't go back that far. The question was, what is the exact construction process of the visuals, and does it come only out of the script, or is it, well, the answer is that that's the magic of a good director, and I like to think my contribution, and the contributions of a lot of various people. The guideline to me that I always talk to film students and classes is making a movie is easy if what you do is you show the audience at any particular second exactly what they need to see in order to be emotionally attached or understand the story or go on this journey and be amazed. Now it sounds easy. All you got to do is show them exactly what they need to see at any 1 second. Well, but getting that part is part of the magic of what we do, both as technicians but also as creative people. What does the audience need to see, be afraid, to feel awed by what they're seeing, to fear for the protagonist, to be afraid of the end? All of these things are questions that come out of the script. What does the script say? And then how do you create the mood and style? And a lot of it is what you draw from what was effective in other movies. Frankly, we steal from the best. What worked really well? What was a really effective use of the wide lens to make everything small and everything distant? The hero's journey across that area it's so far away, and we're afraid that he can, and so this is all the stuff you ask yourself as you're visualizing the movie. You have to see the movie in your mind before you make it. And that's the trick to being somebody who just uses the camera to record actors talking, and to somebody who is like Carpenter and Spielberg, visual storytellers. They can see the movie in their mind. They need to know what choices they have to make so the audience feels exactly what they're supposed to feel. And then you have to know how to accomplish that. Do you use a wide lens? Do you use a lot of light, or is it really dark and sketchy? These are all of the hundreds of choices we make, and that's the difference between really good filmmakers and directors and cinematographers and editors. When do you cut exactly to that close-up of the girl? So it's a very, very complicated, and it's something that's, people say, well, I'm going to go to film school and I'm going to learn all that. Well, you also have to watch a lot of movies to understand why you feel that way. You have to understand psychology. You have to understand how the human brain perceives stuff. 80% of what we see and are attracted to is visual. So there's little things like, well, you don't have some compelling visual just as the girl says something that's really, really important to the story. Because your brain will say, oh, look at the guy with the knife. As opposed to, Henry, I've always loved you my entire life. So there's all kinds of factors that go into making a film, and how do you accomplish it, and how do you move an audience. So The answer is to that question is it depends. I probably could have shortened it to that. Right?
It depends. No, I like that long version of it.
Okay.
And by the way, I do go almost every other month to locations from Halloween and Back to the Future in South Pasadena because I'm a nerd like that, and I just want to live in that world more.
I happen to drive by it all the time because I live there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You have a valid excuse. Mine is a little less,
Yeah.
more sad. Question, right over there?
So I was just wondering, did you ever want to change hats and not be the cinematographer and take over that crazy job as a director?
Yeah, actually, I have directed a couple, 3 times. I have actually co-directed quite a bit. You know, a lot of when I work with a director who's new but trusts me, what I get to do is, you know, co-direct. I don't get credit for it. Sometimes that's good because it's a terrible movie. Sometimes it's not good because it turns into a great movie. And I actually have a couple of projects that I would love to do that I've been working on. I have a friend in today's world of putting together films and financing stuff. He's actually getting the money for a really great project the end of next week. For the past 5 years. Money is very difficult. Projects are difficult to get made, and I would, you know, love to do this film, but it's a slow, tedious process.
I need to plug something that you've done recently.
that?
Our mutual friend, director Nick Simon, had done
Oh, yeah.
a little horror feature called The Girl in the Photographs.
Right.
And what's cool about that is this is you returning to doing a low-budget, independent horror movie, much like Halloween. So what was that experience like for you recently? Because, again, you go from this level to working with some of the biggest directors and actors and studios. And was it fun to just go back and do a little indie horror movie like that?
Yeah, you know, I sort of gravitated to little indie films recently because a lot of these big, giant movies, even though they're, you know, big credits and successes, you're really just a little cog in the wheel because so much is being done by the second unit and the third unit and the visual effects people and 10 different visual effects companies that you never really get to interact with. So I enjoy indie films because you get to really be hands-on with it. Now, the scale you're working at is much smaller, but you know, you really get to be creative and involved. And The Girl in the Photographs was fun because it was exactly that visual storytelling, you know, of horror film. And I had some issues with the fact that you know, and Nick also has issues with the fact that some of the casting wasn't, you know, what it should have been, and you don't feel empathy for, you know, the girl, the girl in the photograph. But you know, the process of telling the story and helping him, you know, create this movie was very, very rewarding.
And it's one that didn't get that as big a release as it should have, but you should check out The Girl in the Photographs. It's a recent horror movie that he did that I think is pretty cool. I think we have time for another question or two. Right here, sir.
What were your inspirations? What led you down the path to cinematography?
What led me down the path to cinematography? Initially, when I was a kid, what I loved was the idea that there were these people who created these worlds that take you, and these movies where they take you on an adventure you can't go in real life. The creation of illusion. I was fascinated by magic as a kid. So I said, well, the greatest magicians of all are these guys making movies. So I was a little misled at first because, you know, what you think of is the world that people are going through is not necessarily just production design, which is what I studied architecture and stuff in college even. But when I was at UCLA, I took a class in cinematography, and I was interested in the camera, and I realized that was the guy who was dynamically involved with creating the illusion. You are the eye of the audience. You know, we only have one eye when we're watching the movie. So So you're the eye of the audience, and you get to lead them through this world. And so that was what I enjoyed doing. And then there were certain ones. Conrad Hall was the cinematographer at the time of some movies that were really very stylish and so forth. So I said, oh yeah, cinematographers were the guys who got to really do it. So that by the time I finished college, I decided that's what I wanted to do.
Let's take one last question. Right here.
Yeah, I want to know your thoughts on film versus digital, and also how the film making and the theatrical experience is changing, where it feels like today there's the studios trying to make all these comic book films and franchises and make $1 billion, and some of the greatest living filmmakers are scrounging to get $10 million to make their films, and nobody goes to see them in theaters, and there's this massive, and like, where do you see the film business going?
Well, the question is, how do I see the difference between film and the new digital world and computers and so forth, and the fact that studios are making big giant effects movies and so forth. So that's actually pretty easy to discuss. We have 2 days. Can you folks be back tomorrow? No, it is the topic of the times. The fact that I obviously came out of a culture of film that was film. Whatever you did happened in front of the lens, the lighting, the special effects, everything, and you were just capturing with the camera. Now, that becomes so blurred that you'll shoot something digitally, and they'll say, the old thing, well, we'll fix it in post, is becoming. You don't even have to say that anymore. You just know that so much of the work that is going to be on the screen is going to be done by computer guys and enhanced later, and the look of a film is accomplished in the color timing computer work later. So it's becoming a very sort of muddled world of who's really in control of the visual image and the story. And recently there's been this whole movement by wanting to shoot with very, very high resolution 8K cameras, because the producers say, well, just shoot it, light it evenly, and we'll do all the lighting afterwards in the computer. We'll choose all the shots later. We want to go into a close-up like they did on the, nothing but trouble. We'll do that, so you just shoot us a bunch of shots and then we'll make the movie later. Well, that's not really the way to do it. It's being done by a committee. It's being done in computers. And of course somebody makes a superhero movie and it makes $1 billion or close to it, and everyone says that's it. That's what we got to make. And so now they all make those instead of and if you interview an audience, they say it was a great ride. There was a whole bunch of stuff that blew up and transformed, but where were the characters? I didn't care about but they almost sort of say, well, that's okay, I'll go just for the ride. Well, there's still a market for character films. There's still a market for films where we as an audience have empathy for, and want to experience, the human emotions and all the stuff that we either like in our real life or miss in our real life or whatever. So it's become a very, very complicated, convoluted world, and not enhanced by the fact that you don't necessarily make it for this definable chain of you go to the theater and then maybe it would be released later on television. Now, they're saying, well, time and date, we'll release it on video at the same time as it's in the theater, and people are confused, should I go see it in the theater or or should I wait? And then what about all the streaming? And the studios don't understand, what's the market for streaming? And so it's become a very, very confused world, the digital and the releasing and so forth. So filmmakers are having a real difficult time getting interesting stuff made. The audience is having trouble finding anything that isn't, just another franchise. So it's an interesting world, and we'll have to see where it develops.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you, Dean, for answering our questions. And you are in the room before tomorrow. If you'd like to meet Dean, he's signing.